We give you the thanks for the gift of life. We cherish and celebrate and give thanks for the gift of this community in which we do live and move and have our being. We give you thanks for the ways that you call us into gatherings such as this, and trust that you are blessing us on the way, on this, our earthly pilgrimage. May we be guided by your spirit of grace and truth and generosity and love in it all. We ask it all in your name. Amen. Well, again, welcome. We're delighted that folks have come together, and let's see hands for those who were on the Holy Land pilgrimage. If you'll, so several, somehow they went to the far edges. We tested the parting of the Jordan River, but it didn't work. So now they're trying it again. We had a fabulous time, and we want to share a bit of our experience with you tonight. Obviously, it is just scratching the surface to be able to share some of that with you in short order. We hope to do it in ways that are edifying for you, and also recognize that we claim pilgrimage as a core spiritual practice for all of us at St. Mark's Cathedral in this community. Pilgrimage can take shape in so many ways, and we're going to share a little bit about one way that has taken shape, and there will be others that we may mention before we wrap up tonight. But we have about a half hour worth of different people offering brief reflections on some perspective of the pilgrimage that we just ended. And then there will be lots of time for us to have open conversation and questions and elaboration from others who may not be speaking but were on the trip. And I just want to say what an incredible group this was, and what a privilege it was for me to be with them and for us to make our way together. I count it as a successful pilgrimage when there are no missed flights, no ER visits, and no broken bones, and we had none of those, so glad for that. Chris, might we see the next slide? Just by way of brief setup, I want to name that the ancient term for pilgrim is peregrinatio, which literally means wanderer, one who is traveling, one who is journeying in search for meaning and purpose, but doing so in the sense that they are being invited into it by their God, by the experience of the holy, by the invitation of the holy to seek what that is. It doesn't have to be abroad, it doesn't have to be far away, but for centuries, we Christians have been about this. It is very much centering on a spirituality of place. Literally, saunter is a derivative of the French Sainte Terre, the Holy Land. So sauntering is actually sauntering into special locations and slowing down enough that you're aware of your surroundings in ways that the divine breaks open to you. So we're asked the question, what makes it sacred? And again, that's not something just for the Holy Land. That's an invitation for us when we're walking by the daffodils that are in full bloom in Volunteer Park, and I could go on and on. And then thirdly, this element of movement, that is an embodied spiritual practice. What's cut off there, I'm not sure why, but from the Acts of the Apostles, Paul says, we live and move and have our being in particular ways. And pilgrims is one of those points of identity for us. Next slide. So tonight, the flow of our evening, as I mentioned, we're going to have very brief serial reflections looking at different perspectives from why pilgrimage to walking where Jesus stood and where Jesus walked. And then the people that we met, the living stones of the Holy Land, and then the communion of saints following in the paths of countless generations. We'll hear a poem that was written on the trip, and we'll see several photo collages. And then after plenty of time for conversation, we'll conclude with worship using one of the resources that we had for our pilgrim group in the Holy Land. With that, I'm going to turn it to Emily, who actually is out of town. But Emily, are you? Yeah, I see you there. So we'll feature you and your slides as well, and then we'll move on from there.
Thanks, Steve. The slides, I can't tell if the slides are up yet, but is there a way you can show the slides for the folks on Zoom? I'm happy to start talking, but I just don't know where we are on the slide, so I was hoping to match that. There we go, great. Okay, so why pilgrimage? As travelers, a place can always shape us. As pilgrims, I think the shift comes when you move through a place with attention to how your spiritual journey weaves into its patterns to see the holy in new and expansive ways. Next slide, please. The Holy Land drew me into two living narratives of place, the footsteps of Christ and the humanity that persists even in the political tension of an occupied state. I remember last summer on pilgrimage to Scotland when I felt the abrupt turn from sleepier days in Iona to the bustle of Edinburgh. The transition from Galilee into Jerusalem was like that, but disorienting and orienting all at once. As we stood at the Mount of Olives and overlooked the city of Jerusalem, I could sense just how dear Galilee must have been to Jesus for restoration and community, even when knowing his steps were toward Jerusalem. I could then sense the geography of that journey in my body. One specific memory of place for me is shown in the night sky in the upper left corner. When I heard the first prayer call rimming the valley below Bethlehem, I sat outside on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket and reading the Gospel of Mark by candlelight, waiting for just enough sunlight to go on a morning run. It felt like lingering in a sound bowl. The actual run is a longer story, but the short of it is that somehow I ended up joining an early morning procession of Armenian clerics in the grotto of the Church of the Nativity, in rather ragged running pants and an old work t-shirt that said, "Taking the hell out of healthcare." These clerics invited me to kneel on the cracked marble floor marked by a silver star, where tradition says Jesus was born. Prayer calls and nativity silence marked the time, all before 6:30 a.m. Next slide, please. One of the wise teachers in my life has shared with me that sometimes progress is like a circular staircase. Even as we keep going up and up, we can't see our progress when we turn back. And so this view from the Basilica in Nazareth, where Mary said yes, reminded me of this teacher's wisdom in my faith journey and how pilgrimage can punctuate light in the circular staircase of life, giving us a foothold for a different view, even when we can't see our way. Next slide. And we go with community. We travel these inner and outer journeys with others. This slide shows the ruins of the first century synagogue in Magdala, the hometown of Mary Magdalene. It was a very special place for me, a thin place for sure. And all I wanted to do was just sit and be quiet. I remember on the bus ride, I didn't even talk on the way back. It was just a sense of stillness in which I wanted to be. The experience of community here was palpable, not just in having our group in person, but in recalling the wisdom and gratitude of women in my life who have made Christ known to me in their work of healing and journeying toward wholeness. Next slide. Our worship booklets that Steve created, I'm sure Greg and others helped as well, provided an array of liturgies and hymns to lead us in worship. But what I found was that in doing so, the words and rhythms lingered throughout my day and changed my focal point. What might be an ordinary bucket of water in a Bedouin village reminded me of baptism as the rains came down all around us, or the moment when someone reached for pita bread, broke it, and gave me a piece. It felt like giving thanks at communion, and we had lots and lots and lots of pita bread. Next slide. And lastly, practicing our learnings. Noticing a learning, something that tugs at you to feel the benediction of pilgrimage unfolding in your day. This is the return of pilgrimage. For me, I learned that I need to practice the lesson of being open to receiving and trusting. I love helping other people, but I'm not always great at accepting it from others or trusting them to be able to help me. In the photo to the left, this is Rowan and her daughter Fatima. Rowan approached me sitting on the ground of a Roman amphitheater in Jerash, Jordan. I was having a very self-critical day, and I just wanted a few minutes to myself. I thought I had found this spot of perfect quietness, and then she appeared. She asked if she could sit down with me and talk with me, and then out of the blue, she proceeded to tell me that she saw light in me, and she just wanted me to know that. She introduced me to her family before I had to leave to catch our bus. But in just a few moments of connection, she reminded me of the beauty and grace of unearned generosity, her spirit and love abundant, this Muslim mother of four who gave me so much in just a few minutes. In the photo to the right, I have forgotten my bike key lock and I have a meeting at Macrina Bakery. I can't bring the bike inside, but behind the counter came a voice. You can lock your bike with mine while you are here. I'm not sure I would have said yes to this invitation had I not just returned from pilgrimage, but I had a sense of trusting and wanting to receive his kind gesture. The gift that day, though, wasn't in a place for my bike, but it was receiving James's story and presence, threaded in unmerited generosity. Next slide. And so I think that this is why we go on pilgrimage, to be able to travel the roads in which we are trying to figure out, and to be able to sync that with our heart's desires, and to be able to find the holy in others and in the places around us. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And so James Davidson will come forward now.
To walk where Jesus walked and to stand where he stood, to be aware that this was the place where it all happened, often evoked in me overwhelming feelings, often awe, sometimes astonishment. Gradually, as I reflected upon what this meant, it had a lot to do with making connections between then and now. Three brief observations. And the first is this. It came shortly after the beginning of our pilgrimage, that for Jesus, it wasn't always the Via Dolorosa, the way of sorrows. For there were sunny days in Galilee. There were shared meals and stories with traveling companions who were becoming friends. There was love and laughter and learning. There was wine and wisdom and wonders. My first observation, the one that carried me really through the whole pilgrimage, is that it is good to be in community when you are following Jesus. The second observation, we knew, just as Jesus knew, where this story was leading us, to Jerusalem, to a cross and a tomb. The dean had prepared us for this shift in tone. And as our journey progressed, we began to sense a greater tension, to see signs of conflict as we passed through checkpoints, as we walked along the wall of separation, as we listened to stories of Palestinians and Israelis, we couldn't help but make that connection between then and now, how politics and religion all too often combine and play that deadly and devastating game of who's in and who's out, who belongs and who doesn't belong. A game that nobody wins and everyone loses, leaving us to echo what is perhaps the most ancient of prayers. Please, let there be a way where there seems to be no way. A third and final observation. You are familiar with the image of dropping a pebble into a pond and of the concentric ripples that spread out. Well, we on pilgrimage had followed those ripples to where the pebble had been dropped. We were at the center of the world, Jerusalem. The day before, we had walked the Via Dolorosa. Now we were inside and had made it through the long line at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Only a few were allowed to enter the tomb at one time, and it was our moment. I was with John and Kathy, and in that moment, we were quietly present within that sacred space. I remember feeling many things, mostly gratitude. What I noticed and what I can witness to is that the tomb was empty, that as our faith proclaims, he is risen, or as the kids say, love does actually win. The tomb was empty, but do you know what wasn't empty? The Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The Basilica of the Annunciation. Indeed, every holy site we visited was filled with pilgrims from Africa, from Asia, from all over the world, pilgrims like us, who, in following the footsteps of Jesus, were making these connections between then and now. And because, and this is my final observation, the story continues. It didn't end with the tomb and the resurrection, or the ascension and the Pentecost, or even when we ended our pilgrimage and returned home. The story continues. And we learned that as followers of Jesus, the questions that were the most important then are the questions that are the most important now. How do we love God? How do we love our neighbor? How do we love our enemy? And our mission statement hasn't changed either. To overcome evil with good. The story continues.
Thank you, James. What we didn't learn on this pilgrimage is how to count off in Roman numerals. You'll have to ask James about that. Jane Mills is up next. What are great synergies that we had is that a few folks from St. Michael's All Angels Episcopal Church in Issaquah joined us. Their priest, Catherine Sedgwick, was supposed to be my co-leader. She injured her knee and couldn't go, but we still had these fine folks from St. Michael's, and Jane is one of them who's going to share a bit now. And the coffee is ready now if you want feedback.
And it smells great. Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Mills. I actually live in the far reaches of North Bend, Washington. And we went across a bridge to get here today to share with you a couple of things that Steve asked me to share with you. He wanted me to talk about the people that we met on the journey. And they were people that Steve referred to early on as conversation partners. And these were prescribed and planned events that usually happened in the evenings. One happened during the day, with very interesting people in very interesting circumstances. And I learned so much about just Israel from these conversations. So the first person that we met after dinner one night was from the Tent of Nations. His name was Daoud. There are a lot of names that were new to us, or at least new to me. He had a compelling story about his family's land. His family had owned this land. He's Palestinian since 1916. And since 1916, it seemed like, based on his story, he had been fighting to keep his land in his family. The land around his family land had been taken, had been repopulated. That tension between Israel and Palestine was amazing. And his passion for his land, which is quite a bit of land, his passion for his land was palpable. One of the things I recalled him saying was, what we're looking at during the day when we're on pilgrimage are dead stones. And he said, he is one of the living stones, which is to say, I'm here, I'm living here, I'm right now, this is real, and the struggle is real. And so he really touched our hearts. We had some good questions for him. And that was our first experience. We were all kind of like, you know, gobsmacked. It's like, whoa, this is really intense. The next crew that we saw was a group representing Parent Circle. Parent Circle is a group of about 600 families, both Palestinian and Israeli, and they must hate each other. That's their requirement. You're born Palestinian, you're born Israeli, you must hate each other. And these two men came from this Parent Circle, this group that intentionally brings Palestinians and Israeli families together because they have one thing in common. They've lost a child to the conflict. And they looked at each other, these two men who looked very different. They looked, you know, if you're going to typecast, they looked Israeli and Palestinian. They looked at each other and they said, one thing we have in common, yes, we've lost our children, but we are brothers, we are human beings. So this group of 600 families has got together with the single mission of trying to stop the violence between these two peoples. One of them told us, well, one of them introduced himself as a terrorist. He said, they think I'm a terrorist. And you could tell it with his great heart that he's not a terrorist. But one of them said his son had grown up learning and wanting to throw stones at other kids that were not like him. And now that his son was in his 20s, he had joined this Parent Circle and understood that building those bridges was the most important thing he could do in his lifetime. So getting the next generation to fully buy into bringing the Palestinians and Israelis together really is their mission. So fantastic group. And I was able to do some reading about them after the pilgrimage. So really worth looking into. A couple days later, we go to the Creche orphanage in Bethlehem. And I thought, well, why are we going to an orphanage? It's run by a Catholic order with 3 nuns there, 3 full-time nuns, and loads of children. The children come in from Bethlehem from all around, and they come in for all kinds of reasons. They're either left at the gates of the orphanage when the mother can't care for them, or they're brought to the orphanage from social services, all kinds of things. But they're there from very young age to, I believe, age 6. And the children we saw were remarkable, beautiful children. They let 20 or 25 of them into this area where we were standing, and our ability to just pick them up and hug them and interact with them. A couple of them got our cell phones and really messed them up because they were playing with them. And the place was absolutely full of joy. One of the challenges for the nun whose name is Sister Loti is that she's not allowed to raise them as Catholic. So there's a beautiful church there, and we had communion there, but the kids are not raised as Catholics. They are just raised as wonderful children and educated up until that age 6, where they go on. Sister Loti was amazingly emotional about the kids. They come from challenging situations, and at age 6, they go on to another place. And there are a lot of reasons that they need to move on at age 6. And all of us probably to a person would have taken one of the kids home if we could, and let's raise them in the United States, but that's not a possibility for them. So the orphanage for me was, really, really an amazing thing. Sister Loti was very focused on the kids today, not where they came from and not where they're going to. So making their lives as rich as possible was really her focus. And we could definitely feel her heart. I mean, this woman, this fantastic woman of God, just cried in front of us because her mission is so heartfelt. The fourth place I wanted to talk to you about was the Princess Basma Center, which is on the Mount of Olives. Since 1964, they've been treating Palestinian children, a third of which who have disabilities. And treating them means a bunch of different things. There's a lot of different kinds of treatments they have. But one of the stigmas in that community there is that if a kid is born with a disability of some sort, and that could be physical or intellectual disability, it's the fault of the mother because she birthed this child who had whatever this disability was. And this child is not somebody we want out in the community because they're an embarrassment. What this center has done is brought in the children and the mothers for 2 or 3 weeks worth of education. And out of it, the children come having had, speech and language therapy, music therapy, physical therapy, autism therapy, and water therapy, depending on what their needs are. And the mothers come out of this 2 or 3 week experience understanding that their child is a child of God. Their child is not a disabled person. Their child has abilities. And that's what the center's aim really is to call out what those children's abilities are. So they're doing great work. We really enjoyed our visit there. And I hope that this place is changing the sense of discrimination that exists for some of these families. So I hope that helps. There were 4 very interesting experiences, and I loved every minute of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Aaron, I think you're next.
So Steve asked, hi everyone, I'm Erin Barry Anderson. It's great to see all of you. And it's really wonderful to be here and do some reflection on our experiences on pilgrimage. It was really amazing. Steve's asked me to talk about the communion of saints and the experience of following in the footsteps of the saints. You know, I studied theology, and I've always kind of just thought in this sort of, I don't know, intellectual, historical way about what it means, what the communion of saints means, and what my place in the communion of saints is. St. Mark's, you know, I know we can't be around the altar right now to share communion together, but kneeling around the altar has been one of my most beautiful experiences of being in the communion of saints, when you can look at one another across the altar receiving Eucharist. You know, and I would think about the saints that we know, you know, our ancestors, our people, our teachers, our mentors, our pastors. So this was kind of how I entered into it. And I didn't think much about, honestly, the communion of saints when I went on this pilgrimage, but we were asked to conceptualize a pilgrimage question. And my question was, what does it mean to come and see? What does it mean to come and see? I thought about the passage in John where, John is with the 2 disciples, John the Baptist is with the 2 disciples, and Jesus walks by, and the disciples leave John and go with Jesus. And they said, where are you staying? And he says, come and see. And so I thought about Jesus a lot. And then, you know, and then I got into this pilgrimage, And I want you to enter in a little bit with your senses and your imagination with me, because my senses brought me to the place of kind of a little bit understanding the communion of saints. Think about our sight. You saw a picture of us looking across the Sea of Galilee. And I just sat there and thought, my God, this is what Jesus and the first disciples saw. They looked across this very same body of water. And then looking across at Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives and thinking about the people who were there with Jesus and the people who have been there for generation after generation after generation, following in these footsteps. The cultural clothes of the saints are modern day saints. It was amazing to see. I mean, it was like the United Nations everywhere we went. I mean, it was phenomenal. And the sounds, it was like Pentecost everywhere we went. The languages were different from every person we were around. And the call to worship and the prayers that you hear, rising into the air. And then touch. You saw one of the first pictures, I think it might have been the first picture, was the picture of Justin putting his hand on that stone, right? Tradition holds that that is the place in the wall where Jesus in the Via Dolorosa stopped to hold himself up on that wall. And you see these stones that have been, the rough edges of these stones have been made smooth by the hands of the saints. The steps that lead up to Caiaphas's house are smooth from the footsteps of the saints. So it's amazing to see these 2,000-year-old buildings and steps and stones that have been worn off, and you can see the oil of the hands of the millions and millions of people who've gone before us. And we were in the Church of the Nativity, and I was telling our group that evening we had reflection, and I said, I was like, you guys, I was about this close to claustrophobic, because it's throngs of people, right? It is so many people, and you're going through these tiny passageways to get where you're supposed to go to see the place where Emily so beautifully described this silver star, where we remember that Jesus was born. And I just, with the physical sense of being so surrounded by so many people, it just was an absolutely mystical experience of going, oh, every day of every year for the last 2,000 years, maybe not in this exact same way, but this has been the pilgrimage for the communion of saints. And we, in that conversation, Deborah said, because I was like, but I don't know, was he really born in Bethlehem? And I'm getting all in my head about it. And, and Deborah goes, he was born here because of us. He was born here because of us. And she didn't mean us, the 30 of us on this pilgrimage. She meant all of us, which I thought was so beautiful. And I will hold that with me forever. And these saints are very human. James talked about the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. You would not imagine that saints actually elbow their way to the tomb of Jesus, but it happens. And I was like, okay, this is a strange time to be, that human, but I get it. It's annoying. There's a lot of people here, but I was like, this is so perfect. We're all trying to get to the tomb of Jesus, things get irritating. I don't know. I don't know. But it made me feel better in a certain way. Like, Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, he gets irritated with his disciples. And so I was like, okay, that's me. That's me. That's all of us. That's all of us on this journey, on this pilgrimage. So I've been thinking a lot about labyrinth and the physical image that is around pilgrimage. And what we got to do was to go to the center. We got to go to the center. And now we get to come back home to all of you and be with our communion of saints. So that's really what feels so powerful and so poignant to me. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Erin. What she didn't say is that the dean had to put himself in timeout for copying the attitude with a woman who broke in line at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So I confessed my sins to the group later that night. Shay.
I promise I'll let this go, but I got to share time with that same woman at the tomb. So that was also a moment of loving kindness prayer for me. But anyway, so my name is Shay Yakani, and I'm so honored to be able to speak with you all tonight a bit about the experience. So one of my intentions for this season of Lent is to do daily writing as a power habit. And so when the awesome Penny Reed invited me to be a guest writer on her blog, I thought, this is awesome. I now have a way to be held accountable to this intention. So I have developed a collection of poems that were reflections from our journeys throughout the day. And this specific poem that I will share with you was written on the day that we went to the orphanage, St. Vincent Creche orphanage that Jane mentioned. And when we also visited the separation wall between Israel and Palestine. And a compass for me and guiding light that day were a couple key points from Dean Steve's homily that morning, that as we would learn about some very challenging and difficulties that people face living in that region, he challenged us to do two things. One is to resist the urge to judge, because judgment is easy. And two was to find a way to hold on to hope. So this is a epistolary poem or letter poem to Hope from Still Tuning. Dear Hope, I wait for you in wee hours of revelation, low with minutes, fat on expectations. And your presence flows from worn courage still. In an amphitheater of cruelty, I struggle to abstain from the war of judgments. You remind me that my work is not to follow nights into battles of hatred endless. My work is in reconciling that which I do not understand, to build compassion in an oasis unknown. You are my fearless guide on roads ripe with rose thorns, haunted by confessions from corporate soldiers. They whisper back to a conscience left long before they sharpened their bayonets, reloaded bullets, and decorated grenades. You give me a strength to smile when my heart drowns in sadness. My feet ache in defiance. You show me that knowing you is to touch the darkness, smell the fear, and feel God's love all around nonetheless. Zip up cobblestone stone fortresses to stand down occupied caves. There is an abundance this night. Hope is invitation at dusk to let go. Let go of anger, let go of laments, laid down in surrender at Manger Square. No wall can separate you from the angel's comfort that all shall be well. And even they weep for orphans left in the streets. Trauma upon trauma, nightmare upon dream. Hope is the blanket that holds us all. You are the ground spring that quenches gaps under joy and kisses memories too heavy to pull. You are the mountain path that living stones walk on through cold desert days. You are the promise everyday saints profess in smiles, and you are the sunrise who caresses our collective awakening. I hold on to you, hope, on this scattered morning and in the broken glass of night. You bind my fragments together in a beloved harmony that sometimes is out of tune, but is a song to God's purpose nonetheless. Still tuning.
Thank you, Shay. Now we'll make a turn, and Chris, this will be back to our slide shows. And James Violet, who is also a member of St. Michael's in Issaquah, was the consummate photographer on the trip, taking photos at every turn. And he's put together something of a photo collage to walk us through for just a few minutes, and then we'll turn it out to the conversation.
Before we go to the next slide, one of the takeaways is we were on a sampler plate. Oh, sorry. We were in the tour was much like a sampler plate. You go for 5 minutes, you do whatever you can in those 5 minutes, and you go to the next 5 minutes and so on. So the collage is a way to kind of capture that. So let's go to the first slide. Here's the group. We had two groups. Actually, it was one group and then a subset. The first group was the 30 that went on the trip to Israel and the West Bank, and then the other group went to Jordan, continued on to Jordan. Of course, we had to get there. We flew Boeing 787. It's an awesome airplane. I'm an aeronautical engineer, so I loved it. It had dimmed windows the whole time, so you can't see anything except if you talk to the flight crew in the back. There's an escape hatch that has a window, and you can take a picture of Greenland as you fly over it. Right? We did the Great Circle route. We landed in Turkey and Istanbul, and then we did a short hop to Tel Aviv. Next slide, please. So one of the interesting things is that we traveled by bus, and the bus drivers, we had two bus drivers. We had, I believe it was Isa on the in the middle there and Muhammad down on the bottom. We drove this massive Mercedes bus. We were like one of 10,000 Mercedes buses in Jerusalem, and this guy was navigating as if it were a teeny tiny car. We stayed at very nice hotels. We had the Pilgrim House at the bottom with the birds. It was very peaceful. Ambassador Hotel in Jerusalem, and Disneyland and the Dead Sea, Movenpick. Okay, next. We also had tour guides. These tour guides made sure that we got to where we were smoothly. Rihanna on your left, and Zayed on the right from Jordan. Next. Galilee was very relaxing. The sunset over the Sea of Galilee, or sunrise over the Sea of Galilee, the first day over there, Emily took this picture of the Gospel Trail. We had the Fishes and Loaves Church. Emily is in there in the middle. She's giving, I think, the Sermon on the Mount, from where the Sermon on the Mount was given, and to demonstrate that, yes, you could hear Jesus from far away because there was a natural amphitheater. All right, so moving on. Then we went to Jerusalem. We had a nice, that was at St. Andrew's? St. Joseph's. Yeah, upper left, and then a nice sister assisted with that, provided the wine. There were folks here, Jerry's leading on the bottom, leading a song. There were lots of places with great acoustics, very nice, and those worship guides were instrumental. In the middle here, you can see Dean Steve. He's shell-shocked in the middle of the dungeon of Jesus. He's just kind of there. That kind of captures some of the emotion as we go through. And then on the bottom, my wife is finding a moment of peace. And We met with the bishop, and you can tell us and a few million of our friends are going down the Via Dolorosa, doing the Stations of the Cross. Next. Now, the homily that I believe Aaron was talking about, where or it was there were three takeaways that mentioned two. One was no judgment. No, it was say it. No judgment and whatever. What's that? Hope. Hold on to hope. Yeah, that was the main thing we were talking. The other part was it's complicated. So here's Father Steve at the time where he's saying it's complicated. All right. And then this is the complicated part. You've got a mixture of many religions. You've got people, from all faiths. The thing I want to point out, is the cross in the upper left is from Galilee. It's kind of free and open. Then next to it is a cross in Jerusalem with razor wire. So it kind of gives you a sense of the differences between the places. Okay, next. This is Sister Lodi. You can tell by the joy on her face, and the kids are just scrambling all to get into her arms. And what I took away from those folks that Jane mentioned was that you could be in the most inhospitable place and still bloom. So I took pictures of flowers in concrete. You have a flower here in a broken water pipe on a wall in Jerusalem, and then you have flower and red rock of Petra. So that just kind of, and then we also took a boat trip on the Sea of Galilee. They have these tour boats, like Disney ride. But on that, there was a bird flying by. I went, got one, and that's kind of the bird flying above the ruckus. Okay, next. Now, switching gears a little bit, apart from the people, there are intricate artwork throughout. So Jerry took the picture here of the 3 stained glass windows, and there's another one. Those are really beautiful. You have to go inside the buildings, and you have 5 minutes. I felt like a treasure hunt. They say, okay, you have 5 free minutes, go. And then, next. So these are some of the examples of the treasures that I found.
There's Chagall windows at the Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. It treats all colors.
It's very, really beautiful. Thanks, Jerry, for taking that picture. Next slide, please. The other thing is, as we're going through, there's art kind of in the open. This was the cross on your left is, it was just a pretty composition. This is at Station 9 of the Villa of the Stations of the Cross. And then down here on the lower right, this was I think the Tomb, the Mosque of the Dome, or what? There's the one with the gold. No, the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock Mosque had this intricate geometric shapes. I thought that was really beautiful. Okay, next. Now this one, some of these art is in the middle of some dimly lit place. So here's Church of Gethsemane, right? It's where Jesus had his, the olive thing where he had, help me out. There's enough people here who know what that is. I'm having a brain freeze right now. Yeah, he was praying in the garden. Right next to that, there's this massive church. And Jerry took the front picture of it. And then I took this next picture on the left. And then I took a 20-second exposure of a detail of, you can see there's a little cross at the top. That's this one. It's a 20-second exposure. I did astrophotography for a long time, so I used some of that skill to get that picture. It's really beautiful. When you zoom in, you can see each individual half centimeter by half centimeter top. Next. Now, in the morning, I walk around. I'm not a morning person, but when you shift time by, 10 hours, I become a morning person just because, right? So I got up, and then this is St. George Cathedral, which is right close to the hotel, and this is where we met the bishop. And the moon was just rising. It was beautiful. You have a couple birds over there. And there's St. George also appears in Jordan in a mosaic, and it appeared in like a subway or a tunnel somewhere in Jerusalem. Next. Now, in addition to the spiritual journey, there's people. So one of the things that became abundantly clear is that there is a lot of agriculture in that area. You have literally shepherds. You can see the shepherd here on the top. He's a Bedouin shepherd in Jordan. You also have shepherds in Galilee in the bottom. You have dates, you have olive trees, you have tomatoes, you have food trucks, you have sidewalks, and then you have folks selling spices. And then you have families looking for food in the morning. Next. Now, they talk about living stones. You can visit the stones, but there's also people, and people are considered the living stones. So this is a little boy in the orphanage. He's running as fast as he can. He's one of the first ones out of the gate, right? That little red shirted guy. And then Emily took a picture of a guy who made a pita heart for her. Yeah, isn't that cute? And then you have folks here. I snuck a picture in one of Father Steve's services of a boat on the Sea of Galilee. And then over here we had folks. Father Steve was there. He was about to go and do one of the liturgy sections out of our book on the Stations of the Cross, and there's these people blaring rock music, and he asked them, oops, can you back up one more? Oh, anyway, they were blaring rock music, and they said, no, we can't turn it down. So they kept doing it. And Jerry took this picture of him saying, hey, how you doing? Then this blind man here was asking for alms. I took a picture of him. And as I took a picture of it, the storekeeper next door opened up the door to the Muslim school. And that's what this picture is, where Pontius Pilate condemned Jesus to death. You're not allowed in there normally, but for some reason, he let me in. And I thought that was really cool. So next. This one, oh wait, not quite. And at the top here, this shows the contrast. The other two guys show the contrast of a Jewish Orthodox singer singing hymns, and then 20 yards away there was a rock music guy. Next, and then this is the last slide. In Jordan also had living stones. Here on the right, you can see in the background, we were in the Hippodrome in Jerash, and there was the word senior on the grass. We walk in there, the word senior. I said, oh, somebody must be having a high school graduation. It turns out that this girl here in the back with the mortarboard was having her graduation pictures taken. So I took a picture of her, and then this little girl here decided to photobomb it. I thought it was adorable, right? And then over here on the right, on the left, we have a fella, he's riding a donkey and he's texting while driving. And I thought, well, isn't that illegal? Well, no, if you're a level 5 autonomous vehicle, then you're okay to text and drive. Okay, so, and then down here we have the world's smallest hotel. I thought it was interesting that, people in hijabs are taking selfies. These ladies would hold the cell phone inside of their hijab, and then they'd have hands-free operation of their phones. Pretty convenient. And then fellows were making sand, and Penny is negotiating with a Syrian refugee in Petra. So I had a good time connecting with people. That's kind of what I do. And by the way, the people that were elbowing Steve, they happened to be an Iberian flight crew. They flew an A330 from Madrid that day, and they were going to go for 2 days and then go on. So I actually had a good time talking with these people. So And then they ran interference when I wanted to take long exposure photos. So, it just, I enjoy interacting with people in this way. That's the last of it.
Thank you, James. Can everyone turn around and take a look at the sunset just for a moment if you're in here? Sorry for those on Zoom, but it's quite a striking one. Maybe you have one where you are too. We want to open it up now to folks here in the room and on Zoom. And if there's any of the pilgrims that didn't have a chance to offer a reflection, if you have something burning and brief, we'd love to hear that now. And if not, then let's just open it up for conversation, questions. Anyone online or, and maybe if, I think Wendy and Jen are monitoring for someone that goes off mute and we can call on you then. Or here in the room. Yep, Randy.
It sounds like a wonderful trip, and I really enjoyed all the presentations. But what did you mean by not to be judgmental?
We were setting up that day to visit some of these living stones. And so in the homily, I said it's complicated. The orphanage exists because Muslim families, well, let me just name it in a blunt way. Young women who are often raped by relatives cannot give birth to those children and survive. There would be shame killing. And so they often, with their mother's help, will slip to the orphanage, deliver at 6 months by C-section, and then they never see their child again. There's no provision for adoption in that Muslim society because the family means everything, but the family doesn't allow for an unwed teenager to give birth to a child. And so it's complicated. And when we hear those stories that Sister Lodi shares, the invitation is to not run and judge all Muslims or all Palestinians. And likewise, when we go to the settlement, an occupied settlement in the West Bank, and we hear a psychotherapist who is a Jewish settler from Australia speak of the way that he's trying to make sense of the existence of Israel and has trouble with his government and some of the policies that it has in relation, and yet he feels like this is the place where he can afford to live in the Holy Land, is in the West Bank. It's complicated. And it's not our responsibility to judge the individual, but that doesn't mean that we're not critiquing the socio-political realities of injustice and oppression. And we made that clear in the homily that that it's easy to jump to an angry response or reaction to someone's story. It's a lot harder to hold that person in relationship or in conversation, even when we disagree. So, and that's part of the challenge of going to an occupied settlement and talking to a Jewish settler and talking to Palestinians like Daoud, who are saying, you know, folks are really trying to destroy my home and are destroying their home. So it's complicated. That's what we meant. All right, others? Yep, Mary.
From the speakers, it might have seemed as though we accomplished not being judgmental. I found the visit to the orphanage really painful, and I've appreciated everybody else's or many people's pulling hope out of the situation. Sister Lottie was an amazing woman, but I almost don't think that I can say that judgment is easy. It's very painful.
Thanks. Yeah, Ruth.
I remember when Daoud was here in Blodell Hall many years ago, what, 10, 12? And as he was speaking to us here, 1,000 of his olive trees were being ripped out by Israelis on his property. And that's a painful truth about our time. But it's really important to remember, along with that, is that we live in a country where we can't control guns. We live in a country where we don't tax the wealthy like we tax poorer people. Excuse me. Oh, I thought it was open. I beg your pardon.
Do you have a question? Yeah.
Not really, but just to comment that it is complicated.
Yeah.
We are complicated.
Right. It's complicated and we're complicated. Amen to that. Others. Steve and Chris, let me say, I sent you an email with a brief 2.5-minute video link while we've been in this. So if you're able to pull that down, we might show that here in a moment.
Could someone comment on the status of the Christian church in today's Israel?
Yeah, Archbishop Hassam Naum probably said it most frankly. The Christian church is decreasing in size. I think it's down to under 50,000 now out of what, 11 million in the population all told, and 2% of the total population and decreasing. Young adults who can are leaving the area. And so, and because Palestine is predominantly Muslim now, the Christian church is largely a family lineal institution, meaning Christians become Christians because their parents were Christians, and the next generation, and so that's where the thing is ceasing. We had planned to worship at Christ Church in Nazareth, an Anglican church there. Nail is the priest, and because we got in so late the night before, we decided not to worship with him that morning, but we met with him as soon as he finished his service, and we were at the Church of the Annunciation in Basilica. And then we worshiped at St. George Cathedral in Jerusalem and had a good 45 minutes or so with the Archbishop after that. And I will say the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem is doing remarkable things, 30 some odd social agencies in 5 different countries, including Princess Basma Rehabilitation Center for Children, schools for the deaf, Arab Episcopal schools in various cities, and so forth. So doing lots of things. So our Good Friday offering here, every year we send to the American Friends, through the American Friends of the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem, so that the Episcopal Diocese can do its good work that it's doing. Yep, Wendy.
This is a time of intense political unrest. And I wonder if you might say something about that and how it affected your visit, or those who you were visiting.
Yeah, thank you. We were keenly aware of the socio-political unrest, especially with the most recent challenges, a constitutional crisis. Actually, they don't have a constitution. It's really a crisis of democracy in Israel over what to do with the Supreme Court and the judiciary in relation to the Knesset and the prime minister. We knew that there were hot spots in the country, but our guides on the ground have been doing this for 40 years, 45 years now, and they have spotters in every city. And it was just clear we were not going to make it to Hebron or Jenin. While we were there, Jenin, there was a Palestinian killed by Israeli forces while we were in country, but we just weren't going to go there. The places where we went, Galilee has none of that sort of open air of conflict. It's there, it's undercurrent for sure, but it's not a place of violence because the Palestinians there are actually Israeli citizens. They're second-class citizens, a whole nother story. When we got to Jerusalem, we were keen on where we would go and when we would go in certain places, and our guides helped us with that. I never felt unsafe. I never felt like we were in harm, but we steered clear of big groups that were amassing in some sort of a protest way. Yep. Okay. Any questions or comments then, either online? If not, I want to show you just a brief couple of minute video. Yep.
Okay. I have the judgmental thing. I think what you said was that I understand and the orphanage and everything, but I don't think the situation is complicated. It's a result of the Zionist effort to take over the whole land of the Jordan. And the occupation and suppression of the Palestinians is what they want to do. And we've seen that come out clearly in some of the things now. So I just hope that we all become more aware of what our tax dollars are supporting in terms of suppression of the Palestinians, the reduction of the, I'm making the comment. That's Mike, I just want to make sure, I hope everybody is aware of that, and from what you said, they are. Thanks.
Thanks, Randy. Let me just, I'm going to speak for myself only at this point, not for the pilgrims. I do not know how to stay in relationship with Rabbi Danny Weiner here on Capitol Hill without holding the space for critique of policy, but not judgment of people. And I want to be clear, Jesus tells us not to judge people. And so when I'm on the ground in the Holy Land, we are going to talk with people with whom we disagree, and we're going to talk with people with whom we agree. And we are not going to take sides in a way that says we are going to go join that protest in that point. Folks are welcome to take what they learned and bring it back and get engaged in whatever resolve. I happen to have strongly held opinions about what's happening to Palestinians and the injustice and the oppression that's happening there. I just don't know how to hold the relationships, which is what I'm called to do, if I'm going to be as zealous as the Zionists are on the other side. Critique me and judge me for that, but that's where I'll go to my grave, I think. And I think that that's the way through to a peaceful solution, if there is going to be one. So there's my soapbox to yours, Randy. I know we've had that conversation many, many times. Let me take it back to the people who are on the ground and the Princess Bosma Center. Again, the Episcopal Church in Jerusalem, in the Holy Land, are the ones that are making this happen. And without them and without our support, these stories, these changes of lives would not be happening. In an honor-shame culture, a child born with disability is the source of shame for the family. And by tradition, they want to shove that child away, out of sight, out of mind. And what the Princess Basma Center for Rehabilitation, they go with social workers into the villages in Palestine. They work with the local agencies. They work with the Israeli government to give them passes to come across the wall and enter East Jerusalem so that the mother and the child can receive the care that they need. And the stories that came out of that visit, where mothers are able to say, I really never wanted my child, but now I love my child. And I'm so proud of what my child is doing. And so I want to share this brief video before we close in prayer. This is Mira, who I think is 11 or 12 years of age now. She was born with disabilities with her legs, and she is now on a trajectory of she will not be able to continue past age 15 at the Princess Basma Center because that's when they age out. But she is planning to become a lawyer to change the rules and the laws that are going to make that happen. So this is Mira's story.
المدرسة كانوا هم مش عارفين، صرت أحكي لهم انتو شو بتكملوا بإسرائيل؟ وأنا بعرف آكل وبعرف أشرب، بعمل كل إشي حالي، انتو شو بتكملوا بإسرائيل؟ لما ما كانوا يقبلوني المدارس كنت أفكر إنه جاء عبالي أصير مثل الطلاب. أنا لما أروح المدرسة ما حد بيضايقني، بالعكس هم بيساعدوني. نفسي إني أروح الشارع لحالي، بس أنا ولا بعمل قدرت. يعني أنا اللي زمان بحلم بهذا الإشي. أنا لما أكبر جاء عبالي أصير محامية عشان أصير اللي بده مساعدة أساعده.
She's a force of nature, is what they report to us. We didn't get to see her that day. They were all on holiday. Let me just say, as Hannah comes up to lead our worship, as I said at the outset, pilgrimage is a spiritual practice that we invite everyone to engage, near and far. Let me highlight 3 different pilgrimages that are taking shape now for next year, for 2024. One is Jennifer and I are going to lead a pilgrimage to the Celtic missions in Ireland in late July, early August, and then end up with a visit to Iona. So we'll start on the west coast, move to the east coast of Ireland, up to Northern Ireland and Corrymeela, and then over to Iona. We're also working on a pilgrimage to the southeastern US with the Civil Rights Trail, but really looking at on the ground how the racial injustices that are laid down there historically, but also in the present, can inform our work in the present here and now as well. We haven't got the firm dates on that yet, but it'll be summer of 24. And then the Compline Choir is heading back to England again. They've been invited to sing in residence for a few days at St. Albans Cathedral, then St. Paul's in London, and then over to Canterbury Cathedral. That will be in August of 24. And the invitation will be those who want to kind of pick up the Benedictine or the monastic rhythms of daily prayer can join. Is it inappropriate to call groupies that want to tag along with the choir? So those are all in the works, and then my plan is to go back to the Holy Land in the next 2 or 3 years with another group who are ready to go. All right, Hannah and Justin.
Thanks. So every day on the pilgrimage, we opened our day and closed our day in prayer together using a variety of resources. So as we close tonight, Justin and I wanted to share with you evening prayer from the Kore Mila community, which is one that we did many times together to close our day. So I just invite you all to take a breath and settle yourself as we've heard the stories and the reflections of this time. And as we lean into pilgrimage being a continued journey, even back here on the ground and with all of you as our community. For love shared,
we are grateful.
for provision and nurture,
We are grateful.
for kindness given,
We are grateful.
for the sorrow we've caused,
We pray for forgiveness.
for injustices ignored,
We pray for forgiveness.
for the encounters with God today in stranger and friend,
We bid you welcome.
for the encounters missed today,
We know that you always see us, even when we don't see you.
for tomorrow,
May we see you in ways expected and unexpected.
we welcome the dark of the night,
We make space for it, and we mark our place in it.
we remember that you, Jesus of Nazareth,
Live through nights of consolation and desolation,
and you walked into the nights of those people you met,
inviting them to justice and truth, love and life.
we welcome the night.
And we welcome you into all our nights,
We pray for those who work by night,
whose day is marked by moon, cloud, and stars,
and we pray for those whose nights are desolate,
that they may have the consolation of prayer, peaceful solitude, and community.
for a peaceful night,
We pray.
for a hopeful day,
We pray.
for a deeper generosity.
We pray.
Amen.